Okay, welcome everyone. Today we are going to continue on the Zhuang Zi's inner chapter, the equality of things. And I have mentioned, okay, this chapter is the most difficult one and usually being considered as a hurdle to read Zhuang Zi. So if you go through this one, and then you will find out the rest will become much easier. So I was planning to finish last week, but turned out I can't because it's really too long and a lot of things to do. So today I'm going to spend probably first 30 minutes to go through the what we did last week, and then we can finish this one. For sure, I guarantee we will finish today's chapter. Okay, so I believe everyone can see my screen, and then so that's the schedule. A little bit change. Last week we talked about chapter 2, and this week we will focus on the second part of chapter 2, and then second part of the chapter 2, and then next week Huang is we're going to change our mind a little bit. Next week, we are going to talk about Mencius and focus Mencius as a politician, state counselor, and philosopher. Okay, so Huang is going to talk about Mencius. And you will see it's a good contrast compared to today's philosophy. And then we move on to the end of May. SK going to talk about Bhagavad Gita, and this time he's going to review the first third of Bhagavad Gita. Okay, so it's about the karma, I think the first part. Okay, so and then on the next, on the beginning of June, we are going to continue on the chapter 3. As if you have been here long, you probably know I go through the history of the Chinese philosophy from the author Feng You Lan, this author, and then I finished the book, and then right now I have 3 books I try to finish for the rest of the year. The first is the Feng You Lan's writing about the Zhuang Zi, his translation, his commentary, and another book is called The Spirit of the Chinese Philosophy. He put the 10 subjects of that, and they go one by one. I probably can go through this one. Another one is a 6 classic Chinese novel. So I will try to go through these 3 books for the rest of the year. So let's go to today's subject. So we are going to on the chapter 2, which is the equality of things. And I'm going to focus on the butterfly dream, which is on the very end of this chapter. I will assume most of people know what's the butterfly dream talk about and what's the meaning. Is anybody want to give your thought or your understanding about the Zhuang Zi's butterfly dream? If any volunteer want to talk about this. Oh, Fred, thank you.
Well, it's the classic dilemma that if you dream that you're a butterfly fluttering around and you wake up, then the question is, are you a man who's dreamed that you're a butterfly, or are you a butterfly who is dreaming that you're a man? That's the gist of it.
Okay, thank you, Fred. Okay, okay, then I think we will see this one, and then I hope you will share your opinion at the end. Is any different than you thought now? Because according to Fred, this one is a traditional classical dilemma or paradox. When you wake up, you don't know you are dreaming or you just wake up or you are still dreaming. I think that's the dilemma usually people face. But Zhuang Tzu put this one in a very, very long chapter and put it in the very end. Then we will see what's going on, why he do this one. I have been thinking this question for a long time, why this so-called dilemma, and he put it at the end and put this heavy chapter and at the very end. So that's the chapter 2. So I'm going to, I talked about this one. Okay, so I'm going quickly through the structure of the chapter 2. I've mentioned last week, and then let me talk again, which is not every reader read this way. And I think this way makes sense, at least makes sense to me. So the whole chapter, I break it down to 4 dialogue, and plus the end is butterfly dream. So I think this one is kind of like a Platonic dialogue on each one. Okay, so they have the question teacher and the student, the question and the answer, and end with very long speech from Socrates. Okay, this kind of format. So especially on the dialogue one, and that's the most difficult one. And I have been go through on that, and today I'm going through again, but I'm going to focus on different things since they have a lot of Zhuang Tzu or Taoism theory, okay, some theoretical foundation in this dialogue. So I'm going to skip the example, story, mythology on the dialogue one. I'm going just treat this one is an essay, and they have some important concept here. So that will be the first one, probably occupy 2/3 of the whole dialogue. Then they have the second dialogue, that when you finish this dialogue, then go to the second dialogue, which is person called Yeh Chueh and Wang Yi. Okay, and I like to use my own different translation. I call it the toothless guy and the toddler kid, the conversation. Then go to the third dialogue. It's between so-called Yeh Chueh and Zhang Wu Zi. Sounds like a Taoist master conversation, but if you dissect the name, it means the magpie, the bird, talk to the twig. Okay, so and then the last one is the shadow talk to the penumbra. Okay, so the very short conversation. Then we go to the butterfly dream. Okay, so that's the whole structure on that. And then, so first part, let's go to the very beginning of dialogue, right? Let's start with the Guo Zi. Okay, he's the Taoist master. Just assume he's the Taoist master. Sitting on the table, and he look at heaven and breathes gently and seemingly to be in a trance and unconscious of his body, right? And Yan Chengzi, who is his disciple and who was attending on him, say, "What is this? Can the body become dust like dry wood and the mind like dead ashes? The man leaning on the table is not he who was there before." Right. So that's the opening. Okay. So the teacher start to talk about Yan. Okay, your question is very good, but just he said, "I lost myself." Okay, he lost yourself. Okay, we want to know why. Then he talk about, do you understand? You may have heard the music of man, music of earth, and have you heard the music of heaven? So that's all the conversation talk about music. And last week we talked about when he used the word, Feng You Lan translate as lie. Okay, in general means music, but it also means any sound, piping, some voice coming out. So that's the starting point. So I'm not going to the detail about the dialogue, but I'm going to abstract this dialogue to make it as some theme, important theme in this dialogue. So this long dialogue, and we can treat them as an essay and talking about some key concept in this chapter, and which also serves the foundation for the entire Taoism philosophy. Okay, so first thing we talk about knowledge, epistemology question, which talk about the great and the small knowledge, and he called the great knowledge and the small knowledge. And the second thing, talk about the concept of oneness. Talk about important thing is two causes in one. Okay, so then he talk about the reason. I think some translation called reason, and then since he called it Yiming, so that means the light of reason. I find out he probably. I find out he probably can call it like Lux. Okay, probably another way to call it. That's what I mean. Okay, so okay, and the last one I think is important. Is talking about the preservation of enlightenment, because we all know enlightenment, and then Zhuang Tzu will take one step further, how to preserve this enlightenment. So actually, this one turned to his moral teaching, and then we will compare with next week when we talk about Mencius. When Mencius talk about the moral and how he deal with that. That's what it.
Jason, I don't know if you know, you lost your sound.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, you're back.
Okay, sorry.
There's an echo, but we can hear you.
Okay, it's okay right now?
Perfect.
Okay. Okay, sorry about this. I think some interruption here.
You lost it just when you were saying Mencius moral something.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let me go back here. Okay, so one thing we will talk about is about the moral teaching. And then next week, there's a good to comparison with next week when we talk about Mencius. That's of course, if you go to Confucian, it's a Mencius. Everything is about moral teaching. But unlike Confucius, okay, Zhuang Zi or Taoism usually talk about many things. Then you drop. Then he dropped what he want to teach morally. Okay, so I think that would be the different, and that would be good to compare. So first part of the dialogue one. Okay, Zhuang Zi want to talk about the knowledge, and he called it the great knowledge and the small knowledge. Okay. So you will see, I just put all the most of the text here, but I'm not going to go all the detail. It will be too long, and I just point out some key point. So here, after they talk about the music of man, music of the earth, and music of the heaven, he shift his conversation to knowledge. Okay, the point is the music or the song actually is language, and the knowledge actually defined by the language. Okay, I think that's the assumption here. So here he starts with great knowledge is wide and comprehensive, Small knowledge is partial and restricted. Great speech is rich and powerful. Small speech is merely so much talk. When people sleep, there is confusion of soul. When awake, there is movement of body. So basically, he set the tone for the entire chapter. You want to talk about knowledge, talk about language, talk about dream and awake. And then he has a long discussion. He described all different kind of mental state, or you want to call it psychology. So that's his first part of conversation. Remember the Nan Guo Ziqi, who is the Taoist master. Then second subject he talking about, second subject he start to move is talking about oneness. So we would like to be a little bit careful about the so-called oneness. His one is a little bit different, have subtle different than when Confucian talk about one. Okay, so the possible is possible, the impossible is impossible. The Tao makes things, and they are what they. The Tao makes things, and they are what they are. And then blah blah blah. Then to the end, he talk about all this by means of the Tao are united and become one. So here he talking about the being, the beautiful and ugly. They are the one. Okay, so I skip some part, but basics, a lot of example. He's talking about the truth and the false. Right? That's when we use Tao, we may think about truth and the false. But in Zhuang Tzu or Taoism point of view, the truth and the false is just the position you take. Same as when you speak, you involve in argument or dialect. Okay, you are talking about right and the wrong, and they also depend on the position you stand. And here he used another example: the beautiful girl and the ugly girl. Here he talked about Li Yu Xi Si. It's just by the standard you look at. Okay, so here he talked about all these means of the Tao are united and become one. And actually, that's the Feng You Lan's translation in Tao in Chinese. It's called Dao Tong Wei Yi. I think the better way, in my understanding, would be all these by means of Tao are connected as one. And actually, I don't see it's united because Tong means they are connected, but not necessarily combined together as one. Okay, that's my understanding by this. And so we may not see this one as obvious or something significant. But if you look at Plato's dialogue, right? If you talk about symposium, talk about beauty, actually talk about love, but Socrates talk about beauty, right? Or in another dialogue called Hippias, right? Hippias Major talk about the beauty. So when Plato or Socrates see a beautiful thing, he want to separate the beautiful thing and the beauty itself. He want to talk about he don't want to talk about his beauty, this dog is beauty, the weather, the scene is beauty, the building is beauty. He want to talk about the form of beauty, which is beauty itself. So I talk about Plato, right? Turn out that his development is become a form or idea, or you want to call it the ethos. In the Zhuang Zi face the same situation, he go to the opposite direction. He talk about Zhuang Zi want to talk about when he see the beautiful thing, he want to see there also something not beautiful or ugly. And they just have a different standard because, we can see, right, when we see the older picture, they say, oh, she's beauty. But actually, in our point of view, may not be pure beauty because that's a different standard. So in Zhuang Zi's point of view is the beautiful and the ugly, just a different point of view. So turn out instead of go to Platonic form, Zhuang Zi go to the other direction. He go everything as Tao. Okay. So I think that's the key difference if you want to compare Taoism and Western philosophy, or you want to call it the Platonic idea. That's the key separate. And I think that's a good comparison because they happen almost in the same time in the history. Right? So that's one thing. He talked about the so-called oneness, okay, which I believe is a little bit different than what the Confucius or the Confucianism talk about oneness. If talk about one, okay, so I think this one have the better interpretation about one. Basically, he talk about two causes at once. Okay, so Fei Wu, you have a question or comment, please?
Yes, Jason, can you please explain how Confucius talked about one or oneness?
Okay, we can if you talk about one, he talked about united. So for example, he talked about great union, 大道. Okay, so great unity. Okay, so that's Confucius utopia. So Confucius was thinking about the great society is just like ancient time. Everything is one. So during this utopian society, everything will be taken care of, okay? And they have the one moral standard that people will follow, okay, which is Confucian's morality. Okay, so that's the key difference as one. So some people see difference as the natural way to go, and some people see united is the natural way to go. I think that would be the key difference. So here will be a clear explanation of Zhuang Zi talking about one, which the one is the two cores at once. So we talk about this story, and it's a short story, and the monkey, the zookeeper or monkey, the person who has a monkey, and then he gives the monkey 3 acorns in the morning and the 7 at afternoon, and the monkey complained, okay, blah blah blah, and then the zookeeper said, okay, I give you 4 in the morning, 3 in the afternoon, and the monkey is happy. Okay, so what's the difference? They all get the 7 at daytime. So here, okay, it's different than what our understanding, today's understanding. The Zhuang Zi want to talk about is he called 两行, 2 causes at once. Basics is no difference. Okay, so what is right? He talk about 和之以是非. Okay, so here the translation here read as therefore the sage talking about Taoism sage harmonize the system of right and the wrong and the rest, the revolution of nature. This is called following 2 causes at once. So I put my own explanation here because I think this English word probably too Confucian concept. Okay, because I don't see it's a harmonized, okay, right and the wrong. I see more on the not distinguish right and the wrong, have the right and the wronging at the same time. So that's my understanding. But of course, you might have your own thinking on this word. I just want to present the text here. And the important is here, Feng You Lan have the his comment on this. He said from here, right? He said, just that the different opinions alone and do not dispute or interfere with them. They do not abolish the difference of different opinion. They just transcend them. This is called the following two courses at once. I like this explanation. I think that he explained the concept of so-called two courses at once. In Chinese, called 两行. And I read this one for, well, I know this word for a long time. And then I've been puzzled by what's the meaning of the this one called 两行 until I see Feng You Lan's translation called two courses at once. I think that makes sense to the Zhuang Zi's concept on that. Okay, so another thing important is talking about in his word. I think he put this one twice in the text, so that means it's important. In Chinese called 莫若以明, so you can say 以明. So Feng You Lan's translation, which is common, consider Ming as reason, because, but again, so-called reason is a little bit different, because sometimes you may think about things more like a principle. But I like to put here is the light, because it's more like light. So he's talking about how to deal with these two different opinions. So in Zhuang Zi's idea, he talked about use the light of reason. And it's in Chinese called 以明, 明 means bright. So I think the good English concept could be fiat lux, okay, in the Bible, that there will be light, just that there will be light. Forget about other things. All right. Madeline, please.
Yes, in the Chinese, does it use a word comparable to reason?
Okay, but I think even in English, right, the reason is very confused words. Even in Kant, right, critique of pure reason and the practical reason. And each book is 800 pages. So, I would say it's also not right to say Chinese have no reason. Okay, so that's also wrong. Okay, but here we use the word 明. Okay, 明 means sun and the moon, which is understanding. But he used another word called 仪, by this way. So I think Feng You Lan, as a Western trained philosopher, he would directly think about its reason and the light, which also Western concept. Okay. So I think if you ask what's the word of the reason, and another word called 理, if you remember in the Neo-Confucian discussion about Zhu Xi, okay, that is on the 13th century. Okay. Chinese Confucian scholars start to use the word 理, which means reason in today's sense. And then another way I will look at it is a principle. And I like the translation called it the universal principle. And sometimes people put the capital R as a reason, which would be similar to Hegelian concept of reason. That means the reason is not in your heart. The reason is outside you. Universal reason is heavenly reason. So I hope I don't make it confused.
Okay.
Basics, that's the situation. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Because reason looks like, I like understanding better, and I also like the idea of the sun moon.
Okay.
Because there is a part, I think it's in this, where the sage stands next to the sun and the moon,
Yeah.
or tucks them under his arm.
Yeah.
So I like that, and it goes very well with light. The thing about reason, it tends to imply intellect. And then the first thing I think of was, well, if you're trying to tell true and false, right and wrong, eloquence, now you're using a finger to define a not finger, or a horse to define a not horse. If you're using reason for those things.
Actually, in this point, I agree with you. And later on, we will talk about Feng You Lan. He talked about William James. Okay, William James talked about the pure experience. Okay, so which seems reject to use reason. And Feng You Lan's point is, it's to the limit of epistemological understanding. You should go to the mysticism. Okay, so I think you are at this moment, in this point of view, I totally agree with you, Madam. Okay, on this one. So that's why I picked these words. I think, fiat lux. Okay, let there be light, probably close to what Zhuang Tzu means, 莫若以民. And later on, he will further define, okay, what does he mean, 莫若以民? Okay, this word. Okay. Fred, please.
You had mentioned a universal principle.
Yeah.
And as I recall, some time ago, we had talked about qi as a universal principle or vital force of life. Is there a correlation between the two?
Okay, put this way. Okay, in Chinese concept of qi is a material. Okay, so in Zhuxi, okay, there's a two school here. One we can call qi school. Another we can call principle school. Right now we talk about Confucianism in the 13th century. Okay, we are not talking about Zhuang Tzu. Two school, one called qi school, one called principle school. Qi school is talking about you have a qi, which is material, but it's intangible material stuff called qi, which has a moral sense. So you act, you cultivate your qi, you become a righteous person, good person on this one. That's the qi school talking about. And the principle school, or you want to call it universal principle, will say, whatever qi is doing, it follow the principle, then it's good. If you don't follow the principle, it's bad. And where is the principle coming from? It's not from you, from the person. It's heavenly principle. And make another example would be a multiplication table, okay? It exists before you know the number, because it's there. And people just find the number, then, they have the multiplication, 9 times 9 equal to 81. So that's the heavenly principle. It's not there. And take a more extreme. Chinese Confucian like to talk about is the xiao, the filial piety, how to treat your parent, right? So before human exists, the xiao, the filial piety already exists, the heavenly, okay? So when people were born and they have a son, they have a father, they have a mother, they have a daughter, then they just follow the heavenly relationship. It's not you decide, it's heavenly. So I think that's the difference, okay?
Good, thank you for the distinction.
You got a distinction?
No, I said, thanks for the distinction.
Oh,
Thank you.
okay. I hope it's not correct. We will have a chance to talk about this one. And Carly, please.
Quickly, I'm trying to think of a Western term that might encapsulate that, and nature comes to mind. Maybe psychologically what people think is natural or follows a sequence versus something supernatural or
You talk about reason or talk about?
well, the difference between principle and the righteous person, the she.
Okay.
Versus the heavenly principle, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, that's another way to look at it. That's back to Zhuang Tzu's discussion on this one. And then here, and I think I put in the blue, that means the Feng You Lan's the comment, right? So he said all distinction of right and wrong are due to opinion, which is from the Zhuang Tzu's writing. Okay, that which can be revealed, the falsity of opinion is reason. Okay, so I think this one is a little bit confusing because we may say we use reason to determine, right? So, and the reason sees things in the light of heaven and knows that the system of right and wrong are human judgment, have nothing to do with nature. To see this is the very essence of Tao. That's what Feng You Lan is talking about. The reason, human reason, just know right and wrong, and which is not nature, is not Tao. And then I think next one we will have a better understanding, because in Zhuang Zi's writing, he talking about this twice, and this one will tie to Lao Zi Dao De Jing is talking about. So this one is a little bit long and like a tongue twister. If you read in Chinese, it's like it's difficult, even difficult to read. And I think English probably also difficult, but it's really like everything is that and everything is this. Things do not know that they are another that. They only knows they are this. So important, he's talking about that and this, right? They just on the different position. You will say that and this. And then if you take the other side, you say that and this. And I think that's a common understanding. He starts from this point. So he said the that and the this produce each other. So why we have that? Because you have this, right? I think that's the point. It's relative. If you don't have a concept of that, then you don't have a concept of this. So here is going to, there is life and there is death, right? And there is death, then there is life. Okay. And here I'd like to point out is, since Chinese word doesn't have be verb, so to express being and the non-being, sometimes for example, in Lao Zi's Dao De Jing, we use you and wu, okay, have and have not, to represent being and non-being. And then in Zhuang Zi, I find out, a lot of time when he talk about life and death, he probably talk about being and non-being, this kind of very classical concept in Western philosophy. So let's jump to the conclusion here. He talked about only the essence, okay? And so he wanted us to stand in the center of the circle, responding to the endless change. This world have endless change. He talked about they have the that, then this. If you have a concept of being, then you have a concept of non-being. And he talked about if you have a concept of possible, then you have the concept of impossible. If you have a concept of right, then you have a concept of wrong. So Zhuang Zi here, he want to say, his solution will be stand at the center of circle and responding to the endless change. It back to the previous slide, we talk about two courses at once, right? It's that two lines, right and wrong, beautiful and ugly, wrong together, and you just stay between. And I think it's in the next chapter, next chapter, chapter 3, you have a little bit more clear on that. So he continued talking about the right is an the right is an endless change, the wrong also an endless change. Therefore, it is said there's nothing better than the use of light of reason, which he talked about, 莫若以明, the light of reason. That's why he want to talk about our attitude, okay, standing in the center, and don't make it a judgment on that. So here I'd like to refer to the Dao De Jing, okay, which is from Lao Zi, couple hundred years before Zhuang Zi. Apparently talk about the same thing on the chapter 2, right? Lao Zi talked about when the people of the world know what makes the beautiful beautiful, the concept of ugly arise. When they know what makes the good good, the concept of evil arises. So why this world has some ugly thing? Because you say something is beautiful. Why this world have evil? Because you say something as good, then they have evil. So he talk about why like this. Everything have the same situation. You have the being, then you have the non-being. You have something difficult, then something will be easy. You have something long, you have something short. You have superiority, then you have the inferiority. You have the music, then non-music, you say that's noise. So you have something, you say, okay, my face is front, then my school is my back. But if you say this one is front, because you have the front, then you have the back. So everything is relative, and that's the continue from the Lao Tzu's teaching, and then Zhuang Zi start to continue. And according to this text, Zhuang Zi chapter, right, you just have enlightenment or you have the light of reason is not enough. So he want to go even further. Okay, he want to talk about the moral teach on that. So it also comes with another long paragraph. So I start to dissect to a few things, so it will be easier to read. Okay, I have to admit this part of text is very difficult to read because it's very dense and put a lot of text together. So I kind of separate them. So I hope it will be easier to read. First, he talked about they have the 8 predicable. Okay, he called 8 predicable. So he says everything left, then you have to write. If you start to discussion, then you have the judgment because you need to draw the conclusion. You start to divide things, then you have an argument. And then you start to emulation, then you start to compete or contentions coming. So all these things happen, okay, because you start to do something. So here he talk about what is beyond this world. The sage do not deny its existence. So that means the sage agree there's something beyond this world, but sage doesn't talk about this. Okay? He doesn't want to talk about beyond this world. And within this world, the sage would discuss it, but he would not make judgment. And what in the history and then ancient kings, the sage just passed the judgment. Okay, that's the right thing, that's the wrong thing, that's it. But don't want to argue, just say, oh, that's right, that's wrong, and that's people do this, people don't do this, that's it. So that's Zhuang Zi's attitude to everything happen. Then he come with 5 moral teaching, let's put it this way, okay? So when there is a division, there's something not divided, right? When there are an argument, there's something which the argument cannot reach. So right now you can see he start to push, we call in the Western concept, the reason, rationality to the limit, right? How is that? The sage embrace all, while men in general argue about them in order to convince each other. So we regular people argue each other, try to get who is right, who is wrong, but sage, okay, here talk about sage is Taoism sage, will embrace all. Okay, so he comes with 4 moral lessons. Talk about great Tao does not admit of being spoken. Great argument does not require words. The great benevolence, which is Ren, very typical Confucian word, is not purposely charitable. Okay, the great purity is not purposely modest or purposely humble. The great courage is not purposely violent. I think the better way to translate is Ji is aggressive. The courage not means aggressive. Then he reverses it, okay? Talk about Tao, that display is not Tao. And the speech that argue, okay, fails short of its end, right? And the Ren, the benevolence that is constantly exercised, does not accomplish its object. The pure, okay, the purity, right, if openly possessed, is not incredulity, right? So I think this is why sometimes it's hard to get it, but my understanding and what I believe, if you see somebody are so clean, sometimes you don't trust this kind of person. I don't know you have this kind of experience or not, but I do see this way, okay? Because if you too pure, too clean, too unreally clean, okay, never get dirty and only speak virtue, that's kind of person I feel not trustworthy. Okay, that could be just my own experience, but that's what Zhuang Tzu is talking about. And talk about the great courage is the great courage, which that is purposely aggressive, will be fail. Okay, that's what he talking about. Then he draw. Therefore, he who knows to three important concepts he want to talk about here. Okay, he talk about what is perfect, what's the store of nature, and what's the preservation of enlightenment. So he talk about he who knows to stop at what he does not know is perfect. Okay, so you will see this one, the concept perfect is very different than Confucius perfect, right? Or a lot of people's perfect. Perfect is keep pursuing better and better. And then Zhuang Tzu here, he talked about you should stop at where you doesn't know, you don't know. And then next chapter will have more opening, we'll start from this one, okay? And then he who knows the argument that require no word and the Tao cannot be named is called the store of nature, okay? The store, which is the store of nature, when things are put in, it is not full. When things are taken out, it's not empty. And he himself does not know why it is so. This one is called preservation of enlightenment. So that's the three things Zhuang Tzu is talking about, okay? But it's interesting, we will see it's very similar to Tao Te Ching, chapter 1, the opening, and most of people probably read this one already. So the Tao, which can be Tao or which can be expressed, is not the unchanging Tao or the great Tao or real Tao, right? The name which can be named is not the unchanging name, or you want to call it the great name, the real name. So he tied to a more detailed explanation of what Tao Te Ching is talking about on the opening. Madeline, please.
Yes, I am remembering in Sun Tzu,
Yeah.
In chapter 8,
Mm-hmm.
there was a discussion of five qualities that are dangerous in a commander.
Yeah.
Was one of them the purity that you had on the previous slide? It was some sort of, was that the same meaning?
Well, okay, yeah, you can say it's the same meaning, but you can, but I think what we can say, okay, let's put it this way, okay, they're the same meaning, but in the different level. That's my opinion. I think here the purity he's talking about more on the philosophical level. In the Sun Tzu, he talk about purity, right? Because you are too pure, you care about your name. Right? So he is talking about utilitarian reason because you will lose the war. I think that's the difference. Right?
Okay, thanks.
But the same word, you are right. Okay. So one thing I'd like to compare, which will kind of lead to next week's discussion when Kwang comes here to talk about Mencius. Okay. So you can compare, well, how does Mencius talk about four seeds, right? He talk about Ren, he talk about which is benevolent, talk about righteous, talk about the richer, talk about the wisdom, and later on in the Neo-Confucian also add the trustworthy. He is not talking about, in their point of view, that have a proper way to do it, to be perfect, not like in Zhuang Zi's talking is kind of stay in between. Okay, so something I think last week we talked about the usefulness. So the real usefulness is in the daily use. Okay, it's hidden. It's not really shown. Okay, that's the right attitude according to Taoism teaching. So we will end the dialogue one with this long comment from Feng You Lan. He talked about, so here, Feng You Lan make an interesting comment, and then he talking about Zhuang Zi's teaching here. He related to William James, his writing in Radical Empiricism. I didn't read this one, so I don't know about this one. I only know William James talk about the tough-minded and gentle-minded, and when he talk about tough-minded, he's talking about the British empiricism. When he talk about tender-minded, he talking about the European, the continental rationalism. And then in the British side, so-called the tough-minded is focused on the subject. And then in the European rationalism is talking about the object. So this subject-object dialectical relationship has been the perennial discussion in the Western tradition. And then in this case, William James, he was Harvard professor on the psychology, okay, and turned into philosophy. He wanted to put the subject-object together, and then his idea, he called himself the radical empiricism basics. His idea is when we know they have a distinction, because the subject-object distinction is on the ontological level, and in the epistemological level, there's no distinction. It's only have a pure experience. That's what my understanding about this concept of pure experience. But I do read another writing which is similar to this kind of thing, is Art as Experience, which is by Zhuang Tzu. He talks about each art is an experience. Okay, that's Zhuang Tzu. And I see the similarity here. So here, how does this concept tie to Zhuang Zi's teaching on this part? According to Feng You Lan, okay, in this paragraph, Zhuang Zi gradually passed the discussion of rational knowledge of the non-distinction of right and wrong to that of mystical experience of the union of individual with the whole. This union is attached in the word of pure experience. That's William James' term. Okay, so I think that here he used the word mysticism. And I feel probably a little bit misleading here, because in the Western tradition, when we talk about rationality or reason, we push to certain limit, we will talk about they have the jump, and that's the faith, that's the mysticism. And when the Western tradition, when we talk about mysticism, about a lot of times since the Christian tradition, we will associate with revelation, faith, God's grace, or depend on which school you are thinking, but basics, that's in the Western side. But on the Chinese philosophy, since there's no Plato's ideas of form, or eidos, so that's different when we talk about mysticism. I think that's why, later it lead to the dream and awake. Okay, so one way to look at it is this mysticism in Western tradition. We will talk about revelation, God's grace, and your faith, this kind of thing. but in the Chinese tradition, it become, or even in the Indian tradition, will go to the Brahman. Okay, so your consciousness back and back. So I think that's the, we will conclude dialogue 1 here. It's a long dialogue, but the rest will be much shorter. Then we can move on to the second part. Okay. So I will stop for minutes if you have a question or anything you want to share on the first part. So remember, in my partition, okay, I read this whole chapter, chapter 2, equality, on the equality of things. I read it as to this moment. It's the dialogue between Nan Guo Ziqi and Yan Chengzi, the teacher and the student, but end with a long teaching from the teacher. Okay, so it ends here. And then Zhuang Zi ready to move to the second dialogue. So before I move to the second dialogue, I will stop here for a minute if you have a question, comment, or anything. No comment? Okay, I hope everything is fine. So, so I think the rest of the conversation, the dialogue will be, I would say, easier and then more fun on that. But let's move on. Okay, for the second dialogue. So, so-called the Yeh Chueh and Wang Yi. If you look at the words, okay, Yeh Chueh means, Yeh means your teeth. Okay, Chueh, your lack of teeth. So he's talking about a guy that no teeth. Wang Yi, okay, Yi means toddler, sometimes called baby. Wang, of course, that's a common last name, but it also means kid. So I think I see some Western translation translates as a baby kid. Okay, it's funny, but when I read this one, I think, okay, if you look at the words, you can see Zhuang Zi's humorous here. Okay, he put a great master and the student have a dialect and then have a long speech about all the theoretical foundation. And then right now he put a toothless guy and the baby kid or a toddler kid have a conversation on that. So let's see how does it say. So this one it directly turned to very Socratic epistemological question, right? How do you know what you don't know? How do you know something you know you don't know? This kind of question. So that's a full question he asked, right? He talked about Yeh Chueh, the toothless guy, asked the toddler kid, okay, do you know in what all things agree? How can I know? That's the answer. Do you know what do you not know? And then the answer is, how can I know? Then do all things have no knowledge? Okay, how can I know? So every answer he doesn't know. But turn out the baby king or the toddler king have a long teaching, okay, to the toothless. Okay, so he said, how can I know that I say I know may not be really what I do not know? How can I know that what I say I do not know may be really something I know, right? When I say something I know, how do you know I really know? When I say something I don't know, I may really know something, right? So everything just what you said is not necessarily represent the right or wrong. And they give some example, and I'm not going to read all this example, but basically he's talking about, well, when the people sleep in the damp place, he have the pen in his waist, right? And then, but the snake has no problem, right? And then when you stay in the high place, you feel frightened, but the monkey doesn't feel this way. And then he said, you taste some food is good, but some animal doesn't taste this food is good. But you can see like some people like spicy food. Some people say spicy food is terrible. And even a lot of people eat, especially Chinese, eat something like bitter melon, right? A lot of people say, oh, that's a wonderful food. It's bitter, but some people don't like it. Coffee, some people drink sweet, some people don't want sweet. So people have a different taste, and even talk about the beautiful. He used the two lady Mao Qiang, Li Ji. Okay, that's two famous beauties, and of course, it's a male centered. So all the male like to look at, like to close to this beauty, but the fish and the birds see the beauty, run away. So what you want to say is, as I look at this matter, right, the principle of, so he tried to develop the concept of taste good, taste bad, okay, beautiful, ugly. So he want to extend this concept to the moral sense, right? So he talk about, as I look at this matter, the principle of benevolence and the righteousness, basics, these two words, benevolence and the righteous means morality, right? The way of the right and the wrong are inextricably mixed and confused. How can I know the difference among them, right? So he start to lead from the your taste, different taste, to your aesthetic taste, beauty and ugly, to the moral as a taste, because that's a different concept, okay, on that. And the true and the false, truth and the falsity, they have just different standards. How can I know? Then Yeh Chueh, the toothless guy, keep asking the fourth question, right? If you do not know what is beneficial and what is harmful, what does this mean to that the perfect man is without this knowledge? So here, tied to the third question, talk about everything have no knowledge. So I think the concept here is, the question is, does everything have knowledge? The Wang Yi, the toddler kid's answer is no knowledge. Okay, there's depend on who you are, depend on what's your position. There's no sense of knowledge, no true knowledge. So Yeh Chueh, the toothless guy, tried to ask, how about the perfect man, right? Here, perfect man, 智人, okay, that's, you can replace with equivalent to Confucian, talk about 君子, the gentleman, or the basically it's the role model, talk about even the perfect situation. They still have the no knowledge. Okay, no knowledge, that's fine, but at least we have the concept of beneficial and harmful, right? So because we don't care of the true or false, we don't care of the taste, we don't care about the beauty and ugly. At least we care about the beneficial and harmful, right? Otherwise we cannot survive. So his answer become mysticism, right? Become mystical answer. He talked about the perfect man is mysterious, okay? With the great lakes, he talked about even the in any kind of situation, he is not being harmed, okay? And then he can ramble at ease beyond the sea. Neither death or life can affect him. How much less the consideration about the beneficial and harmful. So here become a little bit mysticism, because he started to talk about, technically he didn't answer this question, put this way. He talked about that's beyond. If you don't care about the life and the death, being and the non-being, then the beneficial and harmful is not a question. Okay, so the toothless person, the toothless guy, still stick in this world about the beneficial and the harmful. But the toddler kid, Wang Yi, start to tell him, beyond life and death, the harmful and the beneficial is not what you need to care. That's the answer on this question. And here, I think Feng You Lan also draw a conclusion on the whole chapter, where he think to this moment, the whole chapter is make a good point here. So the Feng You Lan, the translator, he talk about the truth is that they are equally right and their ways of habitation are equally good. He talk about the example, people live in the place, in a different place. In the same way, although there is an infinite number of differences between things in different aspects, yet all are right and good. Everything is right, everything is good. So are the different opinions in human world. In Zhuang Tzu's book, the chapter on equality of things, that's this chapter, begins with the interesting story of different noise of wind and the music of earth, as was mentioned above. Okay, that's the first dialogue at the beginning. And all these different noises, different ways of blowing are equally good. The different human opinion are like a different noise of wood, okay, and just like the singing of birds, they together constitute what we may call the music of man. They are equally right and equally good. The sage just amuse themselves with this variety of opinion, but do not quarrel with them. They simply, the sage, stand at the center of the circle, as Zhuang Tzu called it, to meet the infinite variety. And then they let the different opinion alone, and they themselves transcend them. This is Zhuang Tzu called take the two courses at once. So I think Feng You Lan make a conclusion here. Okay, from here, okay, that's the attitude Zhuang Tzu teach us we should take. So that's the second dialogue we move here between the toothless Yeh Chueh and the toddler kids under this conversation. Yeah. Okay, so question, comment before we move to the third one? No? Okay, the third dialogue is between Yeh Chueh and Zhuang Zi. Okay, you will see the Zi at the end. So start here, you probably will see, okay, this text, actually in all Zhuang Zi's text, it started with some metaphysical question or some argument, and a lot of time end with some mysticism. Okay, so I just mentioned about mysticism in the Western tradition because the Christian belief, okay, will lead to the revelation and lead to the God's grace, gives you a faith. A lot of philosophers, especially in the Middle Age, Middle Ages, talk about the faith, grace, depending on you are Catholic or Protestant. Okay, you will talk about in the Protestant, you will talk about faith. Okay. So in the Catholic side, you talk about revelation. Okay, so in Zhuang Zi also have the mystical part, and then later on in the Chinese, most on the southern part of Chinese, Taiwan, become developed as a religious Tao. Okay, so this book sometimes being read as a religious teaching. Okay, so that means they focus more on the mystical part than on the philosophical part. So the third dialogue, you will see the two dialogues called the Yeh Chueh and the Zhuang Zi. Okay, that's a very common Taoist master's name. Okay, doesn't come. But if you dissect the words, Yeh Chueh actually means the magpie, okay, the bird. Chang Wu Zi means the twig, the long twig. So technically, I put this in here. Technically, when the author, I assume is Zhuang Zi, write this text, he's talking about this scene, the birds singing, because if you tie to the beginning, right, he talk about the music, the sound, the music of the earth. And then he said the distinction of human language and the different with bird song. And then it's very possible when the author writes this one, he has this scene in his mind. That's the birds talking, he just interpret, right? So here, the birds, okay, the Yeh Chueh ask the twig, okay, saying, I heard from the master. Okay, here he said master means Confucius. Okay. Okay, the sage doesn't mean Confucius. The sage means Taoism, Taoist sage. Okay, so here he talking about Confucius complain, criticize Taoism. Okay, so the Taoist sage say that Taoist sage does not occupy himself with affairs of the world. He neither, the Taoist sage, he neither seeks gain, he nor avoid injury. Tied to the previous one, okay, it doesn't tell the beneficial or harmful. He has no pleasure in seeking. He does not purposely adhere to Tao. Remember, even he is a Taoist sage. He doesn't purposely adhere to Tao. If you do that, you get into the right and the true and the false. You obscure the Tao. So he does not purposely adhere to Tao. He speaks without speaking. He does not speak when he speaks. Okay. Thus, he roams beyond the limit of this dusty world, which he means. The dusty world means the secular world. The master, okay, here he talk about the Confucius consider the Taoist master discretion is the rough discretion. Okay. But I, the bird, consider this as a mysterious Tao. How do you think about this, dear sir? Okay, so the birds ask the twig. Okay, that's the Taoist sage teach about this, right? But Confucius rejected, say, oh, that's the rough discretion. But I think that's right. Okay, so then the twig, the twig answer the question. Okay, so we talk about this one is so deep mystical, even Yellow Emperor. Okay, so Yellow Emperor, you can say, is even higher, more ancient. In Chinese tradition, more ancient means better. Okay, so even better, like Yellow Empire. Okay, we doesn't really understand, confused about this. How can Confucius understand this, right? So he want to talk about, he means the twig, Mr. Twig. Want to talk about is, he want to tie the life and the death, since we already passed this world, the secular world. So you can see how does the religious person will start to take this one on the religious way or mystical way. In this way, he started to talk about life and the death. So here he want to tell us is the life death is kind of like a dream and awakening, right? So he want to tie to this one, become as our attitude to face. Because in another way, we can say all the philosophical question is teach us how to face death, right? Just like Plato's Phaedrus, right? How does Socrates face death? Okay, so you need to have something. Otherwise, one day when you face death, how are you going to do it? So you can see here, how does this dialogue turn into? Okay, so the twig, okay, answer, the long twig, or you want to call Chang Wu Zi. Okay, how do I know that the love of life is not a delusion? How do I know that he who is afraid of death is not like a man who was away from his home when young and therefore has no intention to return? So try to use the metaphor of life and death is a delusion, just like when you live hometown for a long time and you enjoy the life in America, you forget about the life in Taiwan, like me, and then you're afraid to go back. And he used Li Ji, the beautiful girl again. Okay, Li Ji was daughter of the border warden of Ai, so it's kind of like local governor, the daughter, beautiful girl, daughter, and the state of Jin. Okay, here he talk about Jin. Jin is during that time a most powerful state. Okay, want to marry her because she is beautiful, and she doesn't want to leave her home. Right? She wept until the front part of the robe. She cried. Okay. But when she came to the royal residence, shared with the king, with his luxury coach, ate rich food, she regretted that she had wept. How do I know that the dead will not repent of their former craving for life? So here he started to talk about the life, right? And then he started to talk about life is a great dream. Okay. So here is talking about his speech about the life, right? Those who dream of banquet at night may in the next morning wail and weep, right? You dream you have the great party. In the morning, you just realize your life is terrible. You start to wail and weep. And those who dream of wailing and weeping, maybe in the morning go out to hunt. So here you talk about go out to hunt during that time. Go out to hunt means happy. So when you dream something sad in the dream, but when you wake up, you say, oh, today have hunting party. So, that's a happy day. So when they dream, they do not know they are dreaming. In their dream, they may even interpret dream. Only when they are awake, they begin to know that they dream. By and by come the great awakening, and then we shall find out that the life itself is a great dream. All the while, the fools think that they are awake, that they know. With nice discriminations, they make distinction between prince and grooms, okay, the high ranking and the neighbor, okay. And how stupid. Confucius and you are both in dream. When I say that you are in a dream, I'm also in a dream. This saying is called paradox. So here he called it the paradox, and he wants to keep this paradox. He doesn't want to resolve this paradox. If after 10,000 ages we could once meet a great sage who knows how to explain it, it would be as if we meet him in a very short time. So here would be become a more religious reading, and especially 1,000 years later when the Buddhism teaching come to China, this one easily being tied to the Buddhism teaching, and that's why a lot of people today, when they read Zhuang Zi, they will, I would say, impose or understand this one as Buddhism teaching. Okay, so you can see how it tied together. Right. So you will say, just like I feel Plato's philosophy, idea and the forms, basically is Christian before Jesus. So this one would be kind of like Buddhism teaching before Buddhism in China. So the tweak want to give a lesson here. So basically he's talking about let us forget life. Let us forget the distinction between right and wrong. Let us take our joy in the realm of infinity and remain there. There, I think he means the paradox. Okay, so forget about everything. So that's the trick. The Changwuzi try to teach the birds, the magpie, okay, the lifestyle. So you can see the whole dialogue from now on, we go from the language, music, the Taoist teaching about right and wrong, okay, true and false, life and death, okay, they gradually draw to the life and death, and the dream and awake, okay, so and gradually from the epistemology question and the question of epistemological question to touch the metaphysical question, and gradually move to the religious question, life and death. And then since Zhuang Tzu or the China during that time has no Christian, so to deal with the mystical question, they use dream as a metaphor, as a because there's no church, so use dream as a metaphor to talk about this. So that's the third dialogue, which is short, and the dialogue 4 even shorter. So I will pause for a few minutes if you have a question or something you want to talk, and then we will finish in the next chapter about the fourth dialogue and the butterfly dream. Then we probably have some time to discuss. Madeline, please.
Thanks, Jason. This is wonderful.
Thank you.
It seems to me that there is always going to be a relationship between a magpie and a twig. And I am wondering if in English, the word twig, it can mean one that's either attached to a tree or lying on the ground. So one that's attached to a tree is something that a magpie would perch on. So that would be advice it could hang on to and stand on. If it's lying on the ground, it is advice or a reply that it could pick up and fly away with. And I'm just wondering if there's a connotation about the type of twig contained in the word in Chinese.
Actually, I'm not aware of this. The words he used here is called wu. Wu is one kind of tree. Okay, so I just call it a twig because I will assume that the birds stand on the tree. Okay, and then of course the birds are going to stand on the twig. It's about birds have to stand on the twig because you cannot stand on the unless it's a woodpecker, right? Otherwise you cannot stand on the trunk. Right? So that's my personal interpretation, because I think I assume you will stay on the twig, and the word is wu. Okay, that means one kind of tree. So
Okay, thank you. So
you probably overthink. Okay, so
well, it makes sense. I mean, the replies are they're really just about birds and wood.
yeah, I think so.
Crossbow.
I think a lot of interpretation, probably the Chinese tradition, Chinese scholars are less humorous, okay, usually over serious. So probably take this one. I think they have a lot of humorous here. So when the Nanguo Qizhi speak, he say 引机而坐. I think the people tend to explain as he sit there and lean to the table, have a meditation. But I think that he is sitting under the table, just, you know, just have fun or just lazy or something. I think that's this way, but unfortunately, not most of the people see this way. I see that's the situation he's doing. And when we talk about Yeh Chueh and Wang Yi, and some scholars try to find the Yeh Chueh is the teacher of Xu Yu, who is the sage about. So I think the Yeh Chueh, just look at the words. That means the guy has no teeth. And if you look at the words Wang Yi, that means, well, it could be a person called Wang Yi. It could be means father king. Then I go to the Yeh Chueh. That sounds like a Taoist sage. And Chang Wu Zi, that means long tree, long wood, Mr. Longwood, and Mr. Bird, Mr. Magpie. So it's a beautiful word in Chinese, but I think that probably Zhuang Zi just means that's the birds and that's twig. I hear the birds and twig. They are singing, they are talking. They talk about what they talk. What they think. They talk about Confucius. They talk about, they criticize Confucius. Then they give you a religious reason and a teacher talk about life and the death. So you can see the interlocutor, the people who speak they will get lower and lower, right? So from the Taoist master to the toothless and the toddler and to the birds and to it. So the interlocutor go lower and lower, but their subject become more and more serious. Okay, so I think that's the layout for the entire chapter in the chapter 2. I think I see this layout and I think that's interesting, and then I do read some, that's not all by myself. Because I also read some other writer talking about this, but not a lot. It's not a typical interpretation. Okay, but I think that's the way I see it. And when you see the next one, you will see my logic. I'm not saying it's right, but that's a way to connect everything together. And then, so you will see from the Taoist master to student, from the toothless to the toddler, the birds and the woods, and what's next? A shadow and the penumbra, right? Penumbra. I think the penumbra means the second shadow, when you see the shadow and then the second shadow. And this one is totally, I would say it's a metaphysical question, okay? So that's the fourth dialogue, which is very short, only 1 page. I see this one as Spinoza's question, okay? And then later on, I do see Feng You Lan talking about Spinoza on this part, but I will introduce next time. He thinks this one as Spinoza's question, okay? So the text is very short. In Chinese, only have 20 words, okay? Not long, very short, okay? The penumbra asks the shadow. Okay, so at this previous dialogue, you still have a bird talk to the wood, but right now it's a penumbra and the shadow have a conversation. Okay, so at one moment you move, at another you are at rest, at one moment you sit down, at another you stand up. Why this instability of purpose? So that's the way I read it. Okay, so I think the penumbra is complaining about shadow. See, you stand up, it's just restless. You sit down, you move, you rest, you sit down, you stand up. So then I have to follow you. What's your purpose doing that? What caused you to do this, right? And then the shadow start to answer. Okay, do I have to depend? His answer is a question. Okay, so do I have to depend on something else in order to be what I am? That's a question. Okay, does that something on which I depend still have to depend on something else in order to be what it is? So here he asks the question. I'm not restless. I move because there's something caused me to do something. And does this something have something to cause this? So it's a chain of causation. He's asking this question. Do I have to depend on the scales of snake or the wings of the cicada? So another reader will get confused here about the scales of snake and the wings of cicada. I think here he talks about very small things. So in our understanding would be butterfly effect, right? If some butterfly flipping, and then you will affect another thing, and even another thing, then turn out to a tornado and a disaster, and then something big happened. I think he's talking about this, but he put in the question mark, which a little bit confused here. So how can I tell why I am so, why I'm not so, not otherwise, right? So here, I think, depend on your answer, when he asks the question, the shadow asks the question. If your answer is yes, okay, my behavior is caused by the thing, so he probably talking about a deterministic world, right? Which means everything is predetermined. I have nothing to do with that. Everything is mechanical, okay? If you answer as no, probably he's talking about it's a spontaneous world. And the world is random. There's no cause. Everything just spontaneously happen. So either way, I don't know. But at least he's talking about something, this world, there's nothing I can do, either predetermined or just happen spontaneously. So Feng You Lan's comment is taken as answer, which is same as Guo Xiang, the talk about. Say this shows that everything is spontaneously what it is. One need only to follow one's nature and not to ask why one is so and not otherwise. So that's Feng You Lan, and basically it's Guo Xiang's answer on this one. Do whatever your nature. Okay, don't be try to mimic other people. Don't follow the other stage. Thing. So that's this dialogue is talking about. So you can see the dialogue move to a different direction now. And then Zhuang Zi drop the final line. Okay, it's only very short. It's a butterfly dream that he's talking about. So you can see the dialogue for full dialogue right now in the third person describe Zhuang Zhou. Zhuang Zhou is Zhuang Zi's name. Right? So once upon a time, okay, I have to mention this text is very important text under the last sentence because the language is beautiful. So it's being quoted and quoted many times, not only philosophical meaning, mostly on the literature and the religious. Okay, people will still talk about this. So this one become important text. So I mean this sentence. So once upon a time, Zhuang Zhou dreamed that he was a butterfly fly about, enjoying itself. It did not know that it was Zhuang Zhou. Suddenly he awake and variably was Zhuang Zhou again. We do not know whether it was Zhuang Zhou dreaming that he was a butterfly or whether it was a butterfly dreaming that he was Zhuang Zhou. Between Zhuang Zhou and the butterfly, there must be some distinction. This is the case, what is called the transformation of thing, 物化. Okay, so to this point, I still not sure what Zhuang Zi means, 物化 here. Okay, and of course, if you search for solution, there has a lot of religious solution here, but I do not satisfy with this. I'm still thinking about philosophical interpretation of the transformation of things. Does it mean transcendent? Does it mean paradox or skepticism? You know, so that's another thing can discuss. So finally, I will read the Feng You Lan and the Guo Xiang's interpretation to this dream and also to the entire chapter. This shows that although in ordinary appearance, there is difference between things. In delusion or in dream, one can be also another. The transformation of things proves that the difference among things are not absolute. In Feng You Lan's concept that's anti-absolutism, that everything is relative. And the Guo Xiang, which in the red text, talk about everything considered itself to be right, other to be wrong, itself to be beautiful and other to be ugly. Everything is what is the opinion of one and the opinion and the other are different. That they both have opinion is the same. So both they have opinion the same. So So we will end this one here. And I think Zhuang Zi here posed a big question. That's why I call it the Spinoza's question, because if you're familiar with Spinoza's metaphysics of ontological, first he is monism. He think about this world is deterministic, but everything is determined. How can I live in this world, right? How can you be still free and happy in this deterministic world? Or you are in this world of the spontaneous world. How can you live in this world? All right. So I think in the next chapter, chapter 3, the cultivation of life, probably give a good answer, okay, on the, this question. And another thing, that's my personal reflection when I prepare this chapter. Another thing is the transformation of things. I don't know what that means, and I'm not sure it's important or just something, but I want to think about this. What's the transformation of things? Okay, and what's that means? So I will end this one now. Okay, so the presentation now, and then we will have a few minutes we can discuss. And then if you have comment, question, or some idea you want to share, and then please. Yeah. Oh, Madam, please.
Well, back in the world of the shadow and the penumbra, it seems to be an entirely different interpretation. I mean, it seems as if the interpretation is taking the shadow's words to be the true words, when in fact it's laughable to think of a shadow being completely independent of anything else.
Okay.
And the penumbra itself, it's the lighter part of the shadow. So it's part of the shadow, but it's a lighter part. So now the thing is having a conversation with itself about its independence of something that it's not at all independent of. And it's like listening to a child saying, I'm completely independent of my parents. I'm 10 years old. I do what I want. And I, it's okay. I thought the examples of the snake scales and the cicada wings were very interesting.
Okay.
Those are both things that are attached to a larger body. They're attached to the larger body of an animal. And furthermore, they're made of a similar substance. Be the equivalent in an insect and in a reptile, be the equivalent of something like our fingernails or our hair. Or what our eyeballs are made of. I forget what the things are called. Something like keratin. And so those are things that are semi-transparent. They'll cast a shadow, but it will be a very faint shadow, and it will show the texture of what the thing is. It will show the wing, or it will show the snake scale. And both the cicada and the snake are transformative animals. The cicada comes out from the ground and it goes through many, many molds.
Yeah.
That's when you see those exuvium all over the place. And the snake also goes through many molds.
Yeah, that's great. And I didn't think about this way. But and that's the beauty of this text. Because. Yeah, and I never think about the transformation of the cicada or the snake, or compare the wings of cicada as the penumbra and the shadow. But that's also interesting comparison. CK, please.
Yes, I would like to comment on the question about the butterfly and Zhuang Zi.
Okay, please.
While walking yesterday, I had a eureka moment whereby I thought about this question. And I think, as far as I know, nobody has ever come up with this answer before.
Okay, please.
And it's a rather odd answer. I think I have a solution to his question. Whether it is Zhuang Zi dreaming of the butterfly or the butterfly dreaming of Zhuang Zi, I think my answer has to be that it is Zhuang Zi dreaming of the butterfly. I will tell you the reason or the logic behind my analysis, behind my conclusion. When Zhuang Zi is dreaming of the butterfly, he dreams of a butterfly that is flattering its wings, flying in the air, right? So that is the image that we get from the text, that the butterfly is flying. So Zhuang Zi dreams of a flying butterfly. So for the butterfly to dream of Zhuang Zi, the butterfly has to be at a state of rest, meaning it has, if you're flapping your wings, you can't be dreaming. It's against nature to dream while you're flying, or you know, dreaming means you have to be in a state of rest and dormancy, which the butterfly is not. Therefore, by logical analysis, Zhuang Zi is dreaming of the butterfly, and the butterfly is not dreaming of Zhuang Zi. Thereby, the 1,000-year question has been solved by me taking a walk.
Okay, great. So you probably want to write a paper on this. But actually, I do ask this question, okay, to ChatGPT, okay, but actually I asked him, tell me a joke about Zhuang Zi's butterfly dream, okay, and I think he gave a very good joke, and it's meaningful. I asked ChatGPT, and his answer is I asked ChatGPT to tell me a joke about this. And the ChatGPT said, Zhuang Zi asked his friend, am I in a dream, or am I a person, or in the butterfly dream, or am I a butterfly in a person's dream? And his friend said, I don't know, you know, but only thing I know, in either way, you are Zhuang Zi. Okay, so I think that's a little bit of Buddhism thinking here. You have some store consciousness, okay, you through different transformation, you still have a thing there. So that's the joke from ChatGPT. Okay, so like to share. So we probably will end soon, and the question, comment, and Fred, are you still there? You want to share? How do you think about butterfly dream? And then. No? Okay. That's fine. Okay. Carly, please.
I really liked for the all four dialogues how there was a progression and sort of a descension from macro thinking to micro thinking, and what's serious and what's not serious. And I can sort of see the whole theme emerge and play on itself paradoxically. And to me, that's humorous. I think this is really a great way to look at different ways of thinking through these different characters.
Thank you for this comment. And then I do see this chapter is very difficult. And then until I see divided to 4 dialogue with 1 dream, and I start to see the whole logic on that. Okay, so I'm quite happy, and I very appreciate, you know, and you guys, you listen to me, and then you get this benefit. So I think that will help to read. And then for the next chapter, the cultivation of life, the famous story is about cooking, right? The person, the expert chef who cook, who cut the ox. Okay, so I think he's answering to this one. So I will, but that chapter is very short. Okay, so don't worry about like reading. I check the reading in for it's only 3 pages, so it's relatively short. Okay, so it's easy reading, and then we can have a more relaxed discussion on the chapter 3. Madeline, please.
Yes, this is a question about I guess the structure of the chapter or the inner chapters.
Mhm.
I guess the 8-legged table exam came along after this.
Okay.
Wondering if you see the roots of that system in this text, or maybe even back in Sun Tzu.
I don't see the root of this
No.
one. Yeah, no, I don't see this one. Yeah. So probably I misread it or something, I ignore it. Because I have the tendency to that, of course, that's what like my personal preference. I have a tendency to look at the entire chapter, and then I don't see each section as independent. I see they have the relation and even between chapter and the chapter.
Mhm.
That's the way I read it, because if you don't put the teaching or the dialogue in the big picture, sometimes it's misunderstood.
Is that something that type of 8-legged table essay would be similar to? In other words, the structure, not the content?
No.
No.
The structure is very rigid. Okay. Well, I will say this way. Okay. The ADEC structure, I don't know how does it develop, but it developed much later. And to be honest, the ADEC structure is very good structure to write it. Okay. So, but just again, it's when you have a good tool, you can do a lot of good things, but in the same time, you're being limited by this tool. That's I have to say, you know. And the ADEC structure basically is developed much later time. And I don't see they have the same root of this one. And then you probably want to say, because Jason, my fault, because I know ADEC structure, then I impose this ADEC to the Zhuang Zi's reading, and every single reading, even when I read the Plato's, I impose the ADEC structure on it. You may say this, yeah, but I will deny it. But who knows? You know, probably, you know, I unconsciously, you know, which of course I deny, and I did that. But probably I did that, you know, unconsciously. You know, that's the part I cannot admit since it's unconscious. So it's possible. Okay. So, but we can talk about ADEC one day at a time, I think. And I spend a lot of time playing with ChatGPT, and I do find out the ChatGPT probably very the way they answer the question is kind of follow the structure. And I believe if ask them to pass the royal exam in China, in the ancient Chinese royal exam, they could do a good job, because there's very structures and everything is well balanced. So I try to stay away on that, but anyway, that's it. So, okay, we will end now, and then thank you very much. And then next week we talk about mentions, just give everyone a break, and then we talk about Hindus, and in June we'll come back for the chapter 3. All right, thank you everyone. And chapter 3 is a shorter one, so if you find it's too difficult for this chapter, and then chapter 3 is easy read. Thank you, and see you next week.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.